Besides a financial advisor, who do you need on your team as you build wealth? Welcome to Beyond the Advisor, the show where we gather members of Gatewood's team of diverse specialists to break down complex financial planning questions. Our goal is to provide education to families and business owners that empowers them to build their wealth with purpose and confidence. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Advisor. I'm Nina Breen, our senior wealth planner, joined by Micah Alsobrook, retirement plan consultant, and we're thrilled to talk through another topic with you today. So we are going to talk through a high-level case study of when you structure an LLC as a partnership or an S Corp and what impacts that has to the retirement plan decisions and other things that you might not be thinking of when you make that decision.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And I'm excited because this comes up all the time. And it's something that I think could help a lot of people. So I hope people find value in it. And I'll set the stage with just a recent client example that we had, because I probably see this at least once a month. We have
it's quite often.
It is quite often. And that's why I'm passionate about it. And I'm excited to talk about it. We both have small business clients. You more on the business owner side, me a blend of the two.
Yeah.
And to give an example of how this might come up is, two business owners come in, they're really excited. They might have just had a meeting with their CPA and they're like, hey, we just switched from an LLC to an S Corp and we saved $15,000 a year in taxes. And they're high-fiving, they're really excited about it. And they're excited, they think that we're going to be, exactly, we love that in general. And they look at us like, aren't you excited? And we're like, we're very excited, but we have questions, right? We want to make sure that they understand. Things. Exactly. So while it's an awesome thing on the tax saving side, a lot of the time, if you fail to look at the broader business owner's goals and how that might impact other things like the retirement savings, I think you fail to miss the bigger picture. And it's like that with so many things in life. I'm sure you can think of that where the
ripple effect.
Exactly. You solve one problem and then all of a sudden you've created another or neglected one. So let's use that example.
Okay.
In this example, we have two business owners. Maybe they're in their 40s. They're 50-50 owners of an LLC. They've just made the decision. They've already moved on March 15th to an S Corp. And the business is netting, let's call it $350,000 in income. So before they were taking roughly $175,000 in income and profit each. And now when they've gone to an S Corp, why would they have done that? So a lot of times a CPA and even us think an S Corp's an awesome solution because it allows you to save primarily on payroll taxes.
Yeah. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're an LLC or a partnership, all the income that the business owners take in is typically taxed with self-employment tax or payroll tax, which is around 15.3%.
Got it.
A way to avoid some of that impact is to structure under an S Corp, where you would take some of that profit or that income and put it in a reasonable wage as W-2 or salary income. So you'd have to set up payroll, which is something to think about. And only that W-2 salary wage is taxed with that payroll tax. Any profit or income above that they take home avoids any of that 15.3% tax.
Which is what they're excited about.
Exactly, which is why they came in high-fiving.
Yeah. And
they're super happy about the $15,000 in savings, which is fantastic. But what's the catch, right? You might have one of those business owners that's really wanting to max out their retirement plan. Maybe they're working with a Gatewood planner and they need to catch up. They're behind, or they need to just max out to make sure that they have a great retirement plan. The other might be in a different spot, might be focused on funding education for 3 kids, and they might need to catch up on 529s where they have different liquidity needs, right? Well, that decision to go from LLC or partnership to an S Corp now impacts both of those things. So how does it impact it? You might be asking. So
I might ask that.
I'll lead there myself. So how would that impact those two owners? Well, before they might have been in what's called a SEP, right? Which typically is very normal for a small business to start their retirement planning journey. Typically how that works for an LLC is they can take 20%, up to 20% of their income and put that into a SEP IRA each year, but they're capped at that 20%. So if they kept that SEP IRA and they just switched to an S Corp, That's fine. They're actually now able to put in around 25% of their wage, but it's only based on that W-2 salary. It's no longer based on
25% of a smaller number
exactly
than the overall distribution.
Exactly. And what we find too is a lot of times business owners try to keep that W-2 salary low so they can maximize the tax savings on the remaining profit without realizing, well, you've just also lowered the amount you can put in a SEP IRA. So that's the first thing, is if you don't think about that, you could be unintentionally limiting yourself over here, even though you're benefiting the tax savings over here. The other variable to think about is a lot of times where I come in is, is a SEP IRA the best option if you are moving to an S Corp? Or is it a solo K or even a traditional 401k? As you know, and we've talked about on this podcast, there's different limits and amounts people can put in a 401k compared to a SEP IRA. So a 401k, a solo or a traditional, you're still limited by that 25% rule, but only on the company's contribution to the 401k. The cool thing about a 401k that's different from the SEP is you now have employee contributions, or deferrals is another word for that, that go in on top of that 25%. So use those two owners. One's focused on maxing out, one's focused on education funding. Well, the one that's focused on education might not want to fund his employee contributions up to the max because he needs that liquidity to go into the 529. Whereas the other one might fully utilize that 24,500, which is the 2026 limit, because he wants to max out. Then they both get, the 25% on top of that if they choose to do that.
The 401k offers the flexibility to make that choice on your own.
Correct. Much more flexibility than a SEP IRA. With a SEP IRA, every employee has to contribute the same percentage of their income. So again, it's another variable that isn't often thought about that limits the flexibility in this type of situation.
Yeah. What's the downside to the 401k?
Downside. Very, very good question. There's no free lunch, as we know, in planning. You have to weigh these things. And a lot of times I think that's what makes us different is a lot of times what we'll do in this type of situation is run an analysis of, look, if you stay in LLC or a partnership and you do a SEP, or you stay in LLC and you do a 401k, how does that compare from a tax perspective or retirement savings perspective to if you move to an S Corp in both those situations? And then take it a step further, right? It's, okay, what's a reasonable salary? Let's start there, because the IRS makes you choose a reasonable salary. You can't pay yourself artificially high or low based on your role.
And who decides artificially high or low?
Well, you want to work with your CPA or maybe an attorney to get there.
Maybe both.
Exactly, maybe both. And there's not like a hard and fast. It needs to be reasonable. So the reason I bring that up is you might play within reason, varying levels of W-2 income to make it efficient between the tax savings and the retirement savings, to find somewhere in the middle that helps you achieve both of those goals without really giving up on one area, which is usually what we do, is we show them the numbers and say, you know what, based on all the numbers, we really think you should do an S Corp, and your salary should probably be $98,000 because that allows you to save some money in moving to an S Corp, but also give you the best bang for your buck going into the 401k.
Looking at the planning in light of the full picture and their goals, not just isolated on a tax savings.
Exactly. And I did not answer your question directly, so I will. So what is the downside, right? So if you move to a 401k or even an S Corp for that matter, let's start with that first. You're now introducing payroll. Before you didn't have to mess with that, right?
You just took money out of the bank account from the business and
you got a
put it in yours.
Exactly. It's easy. You're not having to worry about that admin. Now you have a new provider, a new vendor potentially. You're paying probably for that as well. Yeah, so you have a new payroll vendor that you now have to pay, manage, administration that you didn't have before. There's also costs that come with that.
To hiring that vendor.
Exactly. You might have paid your CPA to help you set up the S Corp. There's also filings that you have to do with an S Corp. And then there's the 401k piece, right, where the SEP, really, really easy, low admin. You're not having to file a 5500, any of those things. Whereas you move to a 401k, you've got a record keeper provider you have to pay for, maybe a TPA, an advisor.
More cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly. And you have to weigh those costs against the tax savings and the enhanced retirement to kind of see, am I really coming out ahead when you look at it net? And we tell clients that if it doesn't make sense, we're like, you know what? let's keep a SEP today. The
Yeah.
cost of a 401k at this point in your business doesn't make sense, but let's continue to have the conversation, and down the road, if that changes, we can pivot.
I have to say one of the things that I've loved, there's a lot of things I love about working with your team, but one of the things I've loved is that really that analysis. Because I see it on more the individual business owner. So clients who retire and they're looking at consulting work now and how do we optimize that? How do we save? And your team puts out such a fantastic, here's the breakdown. Here's exactly what it will cost if you did a SEP, if you did a 401k, what your income would need to be, and what the differences would be at different income levels. And I've loved that analysis. I think it makes it so easy to understand.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And that's the goal, because at the end of the day, we want to do what's right for the client, whether it benefits Gatewood or not, honestly. Is we're trying to be objective.
We have fiduciary responsibility to act in their best interest.
That fancy fiduciary rule, darn it, comes into play again. And that's the reason I love doing that is, again, I have no problem telling somebody, I'd love to work with you and I'd love to be your advisor, but right now is not the right time.
Yeah. So Micah, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that you recently came into contact with this with clients in a scenario. And so we've created a hypothetical similar scenario of business owners that are currently 50-50 under an LLC, and they have now switched to an S Corp. We've got $350,000 of our overall business income. We've decided reasonable salaries of $100,000 each. Do you want to walk through the numbers behind that, what they were doing previously under the retirement plan, and what changes they needed to make based on this new election?
Yes. No, absolutely. So let's start with base case. So where they started, right? Let's assume they were an LLC. And again, they're probably taking in $175,000 each if it's $350,000. Let's just divide that by 2.
Yep.
If you take that 20% that I mentioned earlier, which is the limit that they could contribute to a SEP IRA under that arrangement, you're looking at about $33,000 to $35,000 in SEP IRA contributions.
Okay.
So if they had a SEP IRA before, that's likely where they were capped at. And again, as a reminder, they were an LLC, so they weren't getting that benefited tax savings where all of that income that they earned were incurring self-employment payroll tax.
Yep.
So
double taxation.
Exactly. That 15.3 savings that they would get if they moved to the S Corp, they were incurring that. So that's base case. Now let's go to S Corp and let's look at if they kept the SEP IRA, what are the tax savings and the retirement impact versus scenario 2, S Corp, they start a 401k. What's the impact? And for ease of exercise, I'm not going to include admin cost.
Okay.
That is going to be a variable that we would look at. But
always part of your analysis.
Simple, exactly. I don't want to get too weedy here. So let's go to scenario 1 of S Corp.
Okay.
They move to an S Corp, no longer an LLC, but they stay a SEP. If you take that $100,000 salary that they just determined was reasonable, and then the income above that, so the $75K above that they're able to now save that self-employment tax number on, which is roughly 15.3%, you're looking at around $11,500 in taxes saved annually, which is meaningful. But here's the trap. Here's the potential trap, right? How much can they put in the SEP IRA based off of that $100,000? Because again, now we're only limited to that, not the whole. And 25% of 100 is an easy math equation, is $25,000, which is about $8,000 less than they were originally contributing under the LLC. So they lost $8,000 in retirement, but they gained $11,500 in tax savings. So they're really only netting a benefit of about $3,000 to $4,000.
And that's if you don't take into consideration the fact that what you contribute to your retirement plan avoids your regular tax bracket.
Exactly. You're not even including the business tax deduction that come from those contributions. So absolutely. Great point. So that's the first scenario in S Corp. Second scenario, right, is S Corp with 401k. So again, the tax savings is going to look the same. We're talking about the same $100,000 salary, so $11,500, let's call it $1,000 that they're going to save. But what's the retirement contributions they're able to put in now? So again, we'll use 2026 IRS numbers. The employee can put in all the way up to $24,500 if they're under the age of 50.
Okay.
In this example, we're going to assume they're 40.
Okay.
And then on top of that, if the company chooses to make what's called a profit sharing contribution, which we've talked about on this show a lot, they're limited to 25% there again. So in this example, an owner could put in all the way up to $49,500 into the 401k when you combine those two.
That's the 25% from the employer contribution
Correct.
plus the maximum on the employee contribution.
That's right. So when you factor that in, in this case, again, we're not considering the admin costs, but this would be an example where I would strongly recommend they consider the 401k if they have the cash flow, which they appear to do, because of the added benefits they're able to get in retirement contributions.
Yeah.
So this is a good example of where it would make sense. Where it wouldn't make sense, and this is what I talk about all the time, is if it's a business that has, windfall years of profit and then the next year drops way down. And it's not really that stable over time. An S Corp may not be the best fit, and definitely a 401k may not be the best fit, because you need cash flow that's relatively stable to do this. So that would be one consideration too that I would add in doing this analysis.
When do you find that the S Corp starts to make sense? What income does the business need to be producing? Is there kind of a minimum threshold, or is it more consistent is what you're looking for?
That's a good question. I think there is some relative rule of thumb here, but again, this is where I'm not a CPA. I would highly recommend you work with one when you're thinking about this decision. But generally speaking, you want to have some margin above that reasonable W-2 salary that you decide to pay yourself, because that's where the tax benefit comes in. So if you're really only able to pay yourself the W-2 with a little bit above that, well, the tax savings is probably not going to be worth the additional payroll costs, the admin work that you're now doing. So I would keep it simple and just say, look for margin above and beyond that reasonable wage that you pay yourself. If you start increasing that and it stays above the W-2 salary for a few years, that could be a great case for an S Corp.
I would imagine the IRS doesn't want you to reduce your reasonable wage once you've decided that's what it is.
Unless your role gets reduced, probably, right? But again, I'm not a CPA. I don't pretend to be. Another thing to consider with an S Corp is you have to have a company under 100 people. That's the first thing. It's one class of stock, and any distributions above and beyond that W-2 wage has to be in a percentage equal to your ownership stake in the business, which can be different if they're coming from a partnership, for example, because under a partnership, they might be a 50-50 owner, but their distributions might go out 70-30.
Got it.
They can't have that same level of flexibility inside of an S Corp. So again, as you can tell, there's so many things that you have to think about and consider before you make a move like this.
That's why working with a fantastic retirement consultant is important.
I appreciate it.
And a CPA.
Yes, exactly. And your CPA and an attorney.
It takes a team.
Exactly. It does.
Micah, thank you for walking us through that scenario. I think that was super helpful. And I hope that if you're watching, I hope you found a lot of value in it. And if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Advisor. If you'd like to consult with a fantastic retirement plan consultant, you can go ahead and visit our website at gatewoodwealth.com. We'd be happy to help.